You're listening to the Adventure Party for the first week of May 2022. This week, the D&D team made an hour-long presentation on the future of the game, and we responded with an hour 20 of complaining about boats in space. The Adventure Party, discussing tabletop-related gaming the Irish way. Welcome to the party. I'm Scarr.
I'm Dave.
I'm Xaosseed.
Hello again, Xaosseed of the famed OSR blog site, Seed of Worlds. How are you doing this fine day?
I am very well. Thanks for inviting me along. First off, thank you for the opportunity of having a conversation about one of my favourite topics, which for me is very much a big loop back to the very start of where I got into the hobby in the first place, which was I jumped in at AD&D 2nd edition, and one of the first things I ever got my hands on was the original Spelljammer box set. Just this week, we have now had Spelljammer Confirmed, which had been teased so often that the fact that it wasn't confirmed was just being regarded as a meme itself.
Yeah, I've been in an entire, nearly 2-year, 5th Ed Spelljammer campaign, from session 3 to session 60 or 70, in the space of time from 5th Ed coming out and this announcement actually being made.
Yep.
For people who haven't heard, this is part of a new element of the D&D marketing abomination that is the D&D Direct, because if Nintendo does it, clearly we want to be the next Nintendo.
Yes.
Yeah, well, it's looking like the future of 5th Ed. They've brought D&D Beyond in-house. Well, Hasbro has brought D&D Beyond in-house, correcting myself.
See previous episode.
So yeah, I mean, is Spelljammer likely to get a good run in a 5th Ed coat of paint or not, gentlemen?
Well, okay, two things we're seeing here. One is they're trying a bunch of new format stuff, which is kind of going to be interesting because if it works, it works. If it doesn't, are they going to, there'll be an internal argument about whether it didn't work because it was attempting to test bed a new format of release. And if they'd just given it a traditional hardback, blah, 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 everything would have been fine. But one of the key interesting things here is we have already gotten a monstrous compendium released in digital only on D&D Beyond, and we are being told it's going to come along as a slipcase with 3 books and a DM screen and a map. And and WizKids has already got up their pre-order of ships, which are all holding to the old aesthetic, which is interesting. We'll come back to that. But already they're sort of here's what you're getting. Boom. It's a pretty decent window into what's coming down the track at us. And I have not, and correct me if I'm wrong, for other sets that have come out, seen quite so much of a full spectrum, here's everything, coming at us for a release. Am I mistaken?
I don't recall any other settings that come out to have quite that blitz of things. Generally, each supplement will come out, there would be, a DM screen would generally be 50-50 chance on that. And of course there would be a push of the miniatures. Each release would have a couple of icons of painted miniatures, a bunch of unpainted normal miniatures, and sometimes they'd have these sort of dice sets that custom D4 to D20 plus some character cards and an extra map. That's another thing that seems to clog up the shelves. But yeah, this seems to have a little bit of extra stuff, possibly because it does have a new emphasis on stuff like ship combat and the like. Although, given the formats coming in, I'm not sure if someone was expecting the next X-Wing miniatures game, I don't think they're quite going to get that, because all of the mechanical rulesy stuff for Spelljammer is going to be contained inside 64 pages of material. And that's stuff for the DM, setting stuff, all the player stuff, so you can play a GIF or a Plasmoid or whatever, and the rules for ship combat, which I'm not certain. One would hope that they would make those rules a bit more involved than the ones they had in Saltmarsh.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to tell from now, but like if they are limiting themselves to 64 pages of DM and player material, 64 pages of monsters, and on top of the 10 that they've released digitally, and a 64-page adventure. That's what they're limiting themselves to with this slipcase design. Feels to me like 64 pages is not an awful lot of space to have everything in the setting.
I mean, on that, I think monsters, they've got like they're saying 60 monsters in a 64-page book. Okay, so I think our bestiary you're gonna get exactly what you expect. Like that's a page of monsters, kind of like, okay, that's not, let's say, a question. The two that are kind of like interesting is the adventure and the how much they're going to be able to cram into the adventurer's guide, like you just said. So I think we can say the monsters are probably going to get handled exactly like you would have expected. But you're very right in that, like, the adventure is the adventure. And what I was reading that Twitter stream that Owen posted up, that we have
a level 5 to 8 adventure is what he said.
A level 5 to 8 adventure that goes to 2 different crystal spheres and stops over on the Rock of Bral, which implies that the Rock of Bral is described in the Astral Adventures. Like, part of your setting description in book 1 is in, like, the Rock of Bral is going to be the sort of core setting hub city, and that's going to be in there.
That's sort of their trick is to sell more adventure books. They often have up to like almost a quarter of the book will actually be a gazetteer for the location that the adventure is set in, so that even if the adventure Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus has very little Baldur's Gate in it, there's still a good 20 to 25% of that book which is Baldur's Gate material for 5th ed, so Baldur's Gate fans will get something even if the actual adventure is running around Candlekeep and then going down to hell.
We knew that. We were expecting to kind of get like an adventure gazetteer combo. As sort of, if this ever happened, that's kind of what was the strong hypothesis, because like Ghost of Saltmarsh, you got a bunch of adventures and the sea combat rules. Storm King's Thunder, you got like the adventure and mini gazetteer to the north. Dragon Heist, it was Waterdeep and an adventure. So yeah, like a bunch of some sort of setting and some adventure. That seems to be the combo. The question is, though, it's exactly this, is like the adventure is going to have 2 crystal spheres in it, and it's 5 pages per each of, if it's 64 pages of content, and we're saying there's 12 episodes, and we're covering 2 different crystal spheres, and each of those episodes is like 5 pages and a bit. That's going to be tight.
Yeah, that's an overstatement.
I'm not saying undoable.
Between graphics and what have you, like, I imagine the illustrations are going to occupy a fair old chunk of that page count, given previous 5e books. So how much actual writing's there going to be?
Yeah, it is, like, it's not impossible for you to have a nice adventure summed up in 4 pages or 5 pages and have something usable in that place, but it's not WotC's style to do so. Their adventures so far have not been lauded for the efficiency of their writing, as they were.
Succinctness.
They're known for going into massive detail on a couple of things, but then huge chunks will be abstracted, or maps will always take up an awful lot of space. It does also raise the question of, like, some of these episodes might only be 2 or 3 pages if they're just a list of events. And maybe if they have a to leverage this Rock of Bral gazetteer, that maybe they can make advantage of that. But it's just occurred to me that we're 11 minutes in, and if someone doesn't know what Spelljammer is, they may be very lost.
Yes. Okay, that's a fair thing. So let's say Spelljammer is basically the rule. Originally, it's the rules structure of how do you have your space swashbuckling pirate stand over on an open deck under the stars. The original Concordance of Arcane Space, wasn't it? I have it on my desk here. It was setting up a set of rules so that could happen. Like, how does a galleon have an air atmosphere? How does it have a gravity well? How does this, it was a bunch of AD&D rules, AD&D Adventures in Space. And it was, you had a wizard who had a spell jamming helm, some kind of magic user who had a spell jamming helm, which was the engine. All of their spell slots got dumped into this thing, and you had two speeds. You had sort of standard flying speed, and then you had spell jamming speed, which is effectively hyperspace. So you could get through the actual cosmic distances that they had in something approaching a gameable time. So that's what it is. It's flying ships and D&D in space.
And the main 5th Ed version, it seems to be much the same, with this concept that a given solar system will have basically contained inside a crystal sphere, and where we would look into space and see stars, those are actually tiny portals that lead to the intersphere space. The main difference is that the intersphere space has changed from what in the old version was called the phlogiston, the sort of hyperspace, but also it was a gas and it was highly flammable, so you had to make sure you weren't just flinging fireballs everywhere. But that's been replaced, or perhaps more properly, it's been consolidated with the astral sea, which is a similar way for travelers to get to and from places in the multiverse, and has its own culture of raiding people with flying ships, the Githyanki. So it seems that this basically a way to simplify things. We're now saying that the crystal spheres basically link to the astral sea, and you basically jump between spheres that way. But then within each sphere, there is something closer to what we would call space, except that with the power of the spell jamming helms, you have gravity and air clinging to everything.
Yeah, your deep old lore was, how can it be that my different fantasy worlds, like Orth, Toril, Kryn, all of these, how come they've got different pantheons? And it was like, okay, so every one of these, their own system, they're enclosed in a crystal sphere. Okay, that's how come they're all like distinctly different. And then they used to be afloat on this matrix of Phlogiston. But yeah, it was only so that like all of that stuff could still be the prime material plane. Now it looks like they've just gone, we don't need that. Your prime material plane can be like bubbles in the astral sea, which are these crystal spheres. I'm not massively upset by that. Doesn't seem to make a huge difference to all of the stuff that was, you were usable. I think there are probably some people who are going to go, oh no, Phlogiston, but yeah, I don't think that was a hugely material bit of the setting.
Yeah, like I would say you're maybe losing a little bit of Spelljammer's old quirkiness, but you're also linking back into existing cool materials you had, because, the Astral Sea and the dead gods floating between it, and the Githyanki, Red Dragons, Silver Swords, etc., etc., etc. That was all really cool, and now this new way of arranging it allows that material to be combined. And it's not like it really makes a fundamental difference. You're still going to be sailing through a misty, uncertain place, trying to either find a crystal sphere or some horrible abandoned dead god or asteroid hellhole somewhere lost in the wild space.
Well, to me, the biggest difference now is actually coming at it from the other way. So now that you're as you were a planeswalker and you were pottering about in the astral sea, what you were mostly expecting to find were other people astral traveling, like Silver Cord, but like a group of people floating about, planeswalkers. But now we're saying, actually the things you could be running into is like a whole ship full of buccaneers in this like big weird insect-shaped boat flying around. Previously you thought you were going to run into a monster. Now you're going to run into like 3 dozen cutthroats with a pair of heavy ballistas. It's like, that's interesting. Like I think having those two mixed together there is fodder for adventure in there.
Is it trying though to make things a bit normal out in what would it be called, the Astral Sea? Like, say, the similar sort of pirates you find back on a terrestrial ocean? Or am I missing a nuance here?
That is a good question. We don't have a lot on. Basically, if we have the artwork to work on, and of those, hard to tell. I mean, so far you were seeing a kind of big spooky ships floating around, weird wrecks, like a tower on a rock floating in something, in the middle of something, and people mounted on. Is that a giant goldfish? Hard to tell. So I don't know. I mean, I think the maintaining that level of strange, and once you get off world and you fly around, you're not just running into more of exactly the same on a slightly different climate. That's going to be, I think, one of the keys to making all of this work and feel different than just flying closer to the equator or flying to a different continent on the same world. Like, how is it? It's going to make, I've got a flying ship and I visit more of my own world, versus I've got a flying ship and I go to a different world and I know I'm on a different world.
Yeah, there's definitely an emphasis on it being a strange and whimsical journey, done mainly for its own sake. You know, that's the vibe. They had the animation at the start of a bunch of spelljammers on their way home when a bottle just floats through the ether, bonks one of them on the head, and I was like, okay, let's change the plans. Let's go get this treasure in the bottle.
We have every reason to trust that this is a highly trustworthy treasure map. Let's go. Yay.
Yeah. It's definitely feels with the sort of, I don't want to call this the late 5th Ed collapse into wacky or anything. Like, it's not that, like, but there is sort of a bent as 5th Ed has developed, away from what we could call old-fashioned, dungeon crawling and gritty adventure, and more towards new exciting settings, new paradigms of play, and the strange and the weird being emphasized over the mundanities of being, a level 3 wizard in Waterdeep.
Yeah.
That does it does seem to fit in with that sort of trajectory as 5th Ed has matured.
That's true. And I mean, certainly if they were going to pick a setting where you're not fiddling with the setting too much, like this is it. People were throwing rocks at how gonzo and wacky Spelljammer was back when it was out. Like it was not the orthodox knights in armor setting ever. It, like, you had your hippo-headed GIF. Mm-hmm. I always call them GIF, with like giant blunderbusses. You had your tinker gnomes with spelljammers powered by giant space hamsters running on wheels. Like, there was always this undertone in Spelljammer of there's people out here being extremely wacky, and that's. But then at the same time, it was also kind of bolted together with like 3 big blocks of like real bad news. One of which was like the Illithids, who are flying around their nautiloids. The other one's the Neogi, and the third one is the Beholders, like all of whom are like out there flying around in some of the biggest ships out there. And any 3 of them are going to like really rain on your day if you run into them. So it's like a very interesting of like sort of, it's wacky, it's whimsical, it's also deadly dangerous if you run into the wrong people.
Yeah, like will that element of danger be retained, I wonder?
I mean, we are seeing the new look nautiloids. That's the one ship that seems to have been updated. I mean, from like the Baldur's Gate trailers and everything, like, one Illithid in a nautiloid is clearly like a really, like a whole lot of bad news all on his own.
Yeah, and they're definitely leaning into the sort of organic mixture of psionics and biomancy and really upping the eldritch factor. There remains to see whether they will be doing the same with Beholders, because as I recall, Spelljammer was one of the first settings that really tried to give Beholders a place in the universe and had like Death Star style hives with a mother Beholder as like a mountain-sized pillar of flesh in the center, just spawning Beholders and dumping them on planets. That sort of has been pushed aside as 5th Ed went on and came up with a more unusual and sort of insanity first idea of Beholders essentially dreaming themselves into existence as some kind of eldritch force from beyond is just sort of thinking really hard about the prime material plane, and that causes Beholders to spawn.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was some fun variants from different types of dreams that they had, like in the various bestiaries of Fifth Dead. Sorry, Xaosseed, you were saying?
No. I think following on from that, I think we're definitely looking at Beholder's Back because they've got a ship in the WizKid set, like the Tyrant. They've got a Tyrant ship, so we are going to run into Beholders flying around. What else we'll be able to say about it? Unknown at this point.
So, but yeah, like, are we quietly optimistic, or is there enough there to make us worry?
I'm more than quietly optimistic. I'm massively optimistic because the key thing for me here is, as we're seeing from the WizKid set, they have retained the aesthetic. The look is entirely the same. So all we need is like a 5e framework of rules in that book, and all of the setting stuff is recyclable. All of the ship, because a huge amount of the first time round stuff, what were they? They were ship plans. They were schematics. They were all of your kind of like your various bits and pieces about more ships. And we can reuse them. They're the same ships. We see them back again. Pull all of your old stuff back off the shelf. Boom.
Yeah, and there was also gazetteers for each of the settings. So Forgotten Realms had realm space. Is that what the Baroque Brawl is? Realm space?
Yes. I think the closest thing to canon is it's in realm space. There was a Brawl space, but that ongoing debate about, like, as I understand, there was a Brawl space before it was officially dumped into realm space.
There's also grey space for Greyhawk and Kryn space for Dragonlance, which is another thing that the D&D Direct showed off.
And coming to like the Dragonlance one, then was an interesting one actually. But before we move on to the Dragonlance one, there's one last thing I'd just like to note, which is the drop of the Free Monstrous Compendium that came on the back of Spelljammer. That's interesting because like they just said, here's a bunch of free monsters. I wonder, are they going to do that for the ships as well? Are they going to save space in the books by giving us like, here's all your ship stats and plans and everything, not the system. So you'll need to get the book to get like, well, what do I do with all of these? But all of the like the deck plans and everything you need to actually, run and fight the ships are going to be out of the book.
Yeah, as you would need that because, as we said, the systems book's going to be 64 pages, and we can basically assume that like a quarter of that, 16%, would be taken up. 16 pages to have the rules and some example ship plans. That's not... You'll be expected to see 3 or 4 hero ships plus a couple of villain ships. And yeah, I would imagine an awful lot of the deck plan work is either going to be included in the WizKids miniatures or put online in some format. Or they may give the expectation that the DM's Guild will provide, but that's another option.
Man, that'd be, I mean, could be, and certainly like if you just, if you will, all of the ships that I see in the WizKids set, you can get their deck plans and their stats and whatever for AD&D from before. So as long as they tell us like what's the damage that a heavy ballista, a heavy catapult, etc. throws out, and what are my actual space combat rules, you can port, I guess, all of the old stuff forward. So maybe they're going to do that. But anyway, so yeah, that was one thing. Dragonlance.
I do think that we're probably going to have to come back to this free stuff with their Wizard account thing, because it crops up a couple of times. But do people want to talk Dragonlance now?
I thought the timing of all of their stuff across that announcement was interesting, because they dropped in the Onslaught bit, which is like, hey, we've got a new skirmish game. Okay, cool. And then they drop Dragonlance on us, which is an adventure book and battle game. And we get like, we see on the sort of the screen grab, we have like a book, Dragonlance, Shadow of the Dragon Queen. Looks like your standard adventure book, like it'll go on the shelf next to every Storm King's Thunder, the rest of them. And you get this like chunky box, which is Warriors of Kryn. Now I wonder, is it going to be its own thing, or is it going to be like an Onslaught expansion? And because what I got from that trailer on Dragonlance was it is like a setting at war. It is going to be their like hot war setting.
That's a good point. It is a very conflict Riven art that they're showing off for this, and definite vibes of, things are looking really bad. That's definitely the vibe they seem to be giving off. So yeah, I would imagine, it does really seem like they're planning to. What's the over under on them actually setting this new material during the War of the Dragon Queen, or are they going to do the same thing as Forgotten Realms and move forward another 100 years and reset the status quo? What do people think is most likely there?
I like a reboot. Seems to make sense to me, if only because of WotC's history on settings. Forgotten Realms has had any number of apocalypses at this stage.
Yeah, but Forgotten Realms has the advantage of the author is like basically grown into the brickwork at WotC with his various contracts, and is providing constant feedback on, well, if we really want to adapt this to 4th ed, we could do this, this, and this. And it's like, oh, we're undoing that. Well, here's a way to advance the timeline, but also retcon all the things we like back in. So they have the advantage there of someone very
involved.
Yes, involved and willing to compromise. Like, as far as I'm aware, the previous legal issues they were having with the creators of Dragonlance has been resolved amiably?
As I understand, that got cleaned up, yes. Whatever that was, it's unclear what that was all about. That did get solved, and a new set of Dragonlance books are on the way. However, apparently, and I need to, they said creators, Weiss and Hickman, were not aware that this was coming out and were not consulted on it. So I would have said, well, if it'll be aligned with this new set of books that they're bringing out. I mean, of course you do. You synchronize all of your media to make sure it's, it all makes sense. But now I've actually no idea. I'm going to guess that they will move the timeline on a bit, but frankly, your guess is as good as mine. I don't know.
I'm going to maybe take the sort of outside chance. I'm not saying this is as likely as the perfunctory skip the timeline forward thing, but I suspect they may actually go back to the original War of the Dragon Queen, and basically have it be, this is what was happening on this end of the world while all the Dragonlance heroes were doing their stuff over here and over there. And I think they will be trying to frame this adventure book. We can assume a fairly similar adventure book style to something like Stormking's Underknown. A nice little, level 1 to level 10 adventure. I would put down not a lot of money, but a little money that says it would be what's happening over here, some locations and some characters you might know, but mainly it would be an attempt to modernize the original premise and put it as the entire world of Kryn is something that we must defend, as opposed to just these couple of idiots running around the woods complaining at each other, or what have you.
I mean, like the big, based on the trailer, like it looks like mass battles, forces of darkness, etc. I will be like the sort of circle to be squared, I guess, will be, what's it? What were the Dragonborn lookalike things called?
Draconians,
that's it. So like the big sort of circle to be squared will be Draconians, who were always like just straight out, no questions, villains of Dragonlance, through to reconcile them with Dragonborn, and like how is it going to, what's it going to look like that way?
Yeah, because one of the big things was that Draconians weren't so much full of people as walking chemical weapons with various ways to explode and do bad things to you when they killed them.
Oh, like turn to stone when you put a sword at them, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I do dimly recall somewhere in 5th Ed, one of the supplements mentioning Draconians as another take on Dragonborn, but I don't remember the exact quote.
Yeah, I think it's come up once or twice with that thing, and I would expect that the adventure would probably have a bit on playable draconians and some way to retcon, the death throes ability. So, like, maybe you're some kind of redeemed dragonborn who has gone through some ritual and that's turned your death throes into a new type of breath weapon or something. And then you could just sort of slot them in alongside the current dragonborn without too much trouble.
Yeah. Like, I think, coming back to what you were saying there, Shane, I think you're correct in that this will be the setting to do massive conflict. Like this, whereas like Forgotten Realms is for adventuring. All in all, it's a relatively stable place. You get a bunch of people together, they go off, they do some adventures. Occasionally there's some, applied heroing need for a specific threat, but it isn't nation on nation combat. And it looks like that's what we might be getting for Dragonlance. That it'll be, world at war, much, much larger scale type things. So if you want to do that type, like if you want to have that kind of campaign, you do Dragonlance. If you want to be more mercenary heroes, you go to Forgotten Realms, and it'll be like, depending on what you want to do, you go to different settings.
And now there's a convenient way to get between them.
Exactly.
Just saying, I do think you're onto something there, that there does seem to be more emphasis on conflict and war as a force in this new Dragonlance trailer that we're seeing, and they very much a vibe of all the nations of Krynn coming together against the great threat, which is almost definitely going to be what's Tiamat's name in that setting again? Takesis, yes. So that is definitely what's on the cards here. But whether they'll go the whole hog and have like mass combat rules.
Well, I mean, Battle Game is the other half of the thing that's coming out.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Adventure book in one side and Battle Game is the other, so...
I wouldn't have gone with your idea of Warriors of Krynn being sort of a supplement to Onslaught. I would have assumed that it was going to be another D&D style board game like they made for, not Curse of Strahd, but like they made a couple of those, adventuring board games. But now that you say it, I do think there might be something to that this battle game will be combined with their other battle game.
Yeah, because I mean, to me, like just thinking, it would seem a bit odd to me to drop Onslaught and go like, hey, there's a skirmish game. We give that a bit of a push, particularly when it seems to be such a generalist skirmish game, like Rangers of Waterdeep. Some of those other ones, they kind of have like a very specific theme, but Onslaught looks to me like more of an engine. You can do all sorts of things. And for them to go like, hey, we've released a kind of generalist skirmish game, and then later in the year we're going to drop a sort of a generalist war game. Like maybe Onslaught will be the skirmish game, and Warriors of Krynn is going to be effectively like a Warhammer Fantasy Battle competitor. Okay, fine. That then is clear differentiation. One is like a dozen miniatures on the board, skirmish, and the other one is dozens of miniatures on either side. Unit on unit action. Yeah, okay, cool. But unless there's some like really clear scale differentiator, then it would seem to me a bit odd to go like, here's two different games that are more or less for the same situation in the same year. So I would like, if it's even vaguely to like the same scale as Onslaught, I would think that maybe there'd be some way to connect the two of them together. Unless it is like completely different, like it's a board game. It's, what's it? Game of Thrones, the board game, like massive, all of Krynn, you're moving around, like it's on the scale of like Mighty Empires or thereabouts. Okay, cool.
Maybe. That would be interesting to see. I don't think they have... D&D board games have had generally a low presence in the new paradigm of what people call the board game renaissance. The main breakout hit has been Lords of Waterdeep, but also I do believe some of these tactical dungeon crawler games like Wrath of Ashardalon and Castle Ravenloft, I think those have done decent business as competent versions on the sort of Gloomhaven light aesthetic. So it is interesting to see, like, are they actually doing a concerted push to move things into the sort of wargaming and miniatures based space. If they're putting this much emphasis on what's going to be physical product, then it sort of counterbalances very neatly with their other thing, which is your wizard account now has more value.
Mm-hmm.
As I see, there's at least 3 mentions of the wizards. Free stuff you get with a Wizards or D&D Beyond account. There's only one time when they actually said those, both of those, but there's enough to make me assume that with the recent acquisition, that those two are probably going to be combined relatively soon. I suspect there's going to be a bit of consolidation there, once they figure out the process. But it's right. Like right now, they're saying there's the Monsters Compendium, and the first group of that is Spelljammer. So we could be assuming that for each major release, there's going to be a Monsters Compendium release, which will add like less than a dozen monsters or the similar for each thing that comes out. Presumably, this will talk to the D&D Beyond system and the various packets that it already has there. Eventually, there's also going to be talk of a prequel adventure for Spelljammer. So we're presuming that's something like 10, 16 page prequel, little mini adventures. As I say, one of the things that came up in the comments for Spelljammer is that because the main hardcover book will be a level 5 to 8 adventure, we can presume the prequel adventure is some form of transition adventure. Yeah, a 1 to 4 adventure to get you your first Spelljamming helm. It's just kind of a tradition, isn't it?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, like I was reading through like my old Spelljammer stuff, like the first Spelljammer adventure there was involves you're standing in a market square and an anchor falls out of the sky.
Wait, what?
And then some guys come down on a sort of on a kind of a crow's nest that's running up and down the anchor and go, basically, a menace is coming to destroy the world. We need heroes. And you're supposed to like sign on and go solve stuff.
That's a hook.
Hook. It's like the only way it's clearly not like it's not so obvious as a hook because there's a hook on each side of an anchor. But it was like I picked it up and it was like I remember this being a bit railroady. Oh yeah, okay, right.
Yeah, there's those things there. So there's definitely, it seems like if they keep this up, it seems that every major release is going to have 1 or 2 of these free supplements that are going to be integrated into your Wizard/D&D Beyond digital library. There's also they're making another one of their starter sets. They've had, I think this will be the 5th. This one is apparently being very specifically aimed at completely brand new players, and they make some hay about it having digital onboarding tools. So the idea is that they sort of have a whole bunch of extra digital resources that come with the starter set to get a complete bunch of completely new players through the starter set and into the hobby. That seems the vibe.
Interesting.
Like I'm going to admit if there may be some details I'm missing because the presenters they had on the D&D Direct were very cringe. The clear the vibe I got was very much marketing interns held at gunpoint, but that's probably being a bit mean to them.
I think let us set aside that which we cannot speak positively about.
Yeah, fair.
On
fair
that side of things, mainly because I think we've got enough to chew on with the rest of it. One of which being like what you put your finger on it with the digital onboarding tools. Like one of the tricks, like the big kind of trick they need to pull off, is the person who spends the vast majority of money in the hobby at the moment is the dungeon master.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to figure out, how when they get more people into the hobby, that's great, but how are they giving wizards a couple of quid now? And if it's like, so they kind of had a bite at it with, I think, starting with the turtle. Was it like $2.99 to get the right, to get your, I can use a turtle on D&D Beyond?
I think there was one for grungs as well.
Grung, exactly, yeah.
And I think that we should not ignore the miniature-based phenomenon that has...
exactly.
Yeah, I do think that while they haven't managed to break into the Games Workshop thing of selling people, 5 Space Marines for 20 quid, they have got a market of, here is all the possible options for your character, find one of these miniatures and paint them lovingly. It does seem to be the vibe that they have given off from all of these things.
Exactly. Like it's a question of like what there's the things that you can spend, the things that you can sell to the dungeon master. That's one set, and where you really want to try and tap into, and like the dice that you see them. I get like my D&D Beyond, the emails that I get from them seem to be a good third. Hey, would you like to buy either holiday themed dice or some kind of fancy skin for D&D Beyond? Like, for me, to both of those, no, not under any circumstances. But that does seem to be the types of things, like cosmetic bits and pieces for your digital interface that they can, super cheap to make, ship them by the millions. You can price them pretty cheaply because, there's like, it's just data. And then if you can get as many people as you can onto your digital portal, sell them these kind of like, it's a hat, microtransactions, stuff like that. That's where they would like to sit. Because at the moment, like the DMs are shelling out, like what Spelljammer is going to be $80. I'm going to pre-order that.
70, I thought it was 70 or something, but yeah. It's a substantial amount. And certainly all the people who want high value for their gaming dollar are complaining about it costs more, but there's not as much page count, and I don't care about a map of the Rock of Brawl. Whoa, I don't want to pay for art. There's definitely been that vibe. But I do think, there's the idea of they also want to have more low-end hooks to get people to spend a little bit. And certainly if the vibe I'm getting from this starter set thing is that they explicitly say that when you sign up for the account and put in whatever code you have from the starter set, it's going to give you a digital library of tools.
Mm-hmm.
And presumably they want people playing from their phones. So it's like, presumably a GM buys it and has the GM account and sends people's own accounts details on their character of the pre-gens. And then they'll have all the things, little dice roller app. Everything will be integrated into the new and improved D&D Beyond. That would be my guess on how this would go.
As we've alluded to before on the show, there has been a shift towards digital only character sheets, details, that spell lists, that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as I said on the previous episode about D&D Beyond, I don't think there's any real threat of them abandoning the physical space. If this is their lineup of products and it's this big push for miniaturization, but they are definitely planning to use the digital systems to try to help people in and grab people who do live more digital only lives. And I do think like they're probably not going to announce it anytime soon, but I do suspect that the official VTT for D&D Beyond is definitely a plan on someone's planning sheet and has been sold to shareholders very heavily.
Do you know, actually, on that miniatures point, do you know what I'm just realising? Here's a common thread of, so what's our two big things that got announced? One, Spelljammer. Hey, buy a bunch of ship minis for this new ship combat system you're about to get. Two, Dragonlance. Hey, Warriors of Krynn. Could it be a war game? Buy a bunch of minis for our new war game.
A whole bunch. We've sold you soldiers. We've sold you dragon miniatures. But we haven't sold you people on the backs of dragons with dragon lances.
Yeah.
That's the next wave.
Yeah. But yeah, I can certainly see there's a two-pronged thing of like, okay, the physical people, the meat space folk, they're still only going to buy one book, so what accessory can we sell them? And two, the digital people who, like, we weren't going to sell a book to, what do we need to do to get them to reel them in on the digital side of things?
Microtransactions.
Yeah. You know what? The one thing I'm going to say is there's stuff that I regard as complete fluff and nonsense and stuff that's actually value. And I'm going to say that the recent kind of generation of integration where you're able to go, we're playing on our VTT. Oh, I've got this spell in my spell sheet. Oh, I wonder what what does this effect exactly do? Right click it. I can throw it into the chat. it's the rules are much more accessible as like a one click down layer that we can, easily throw in and keeps the flow of the game going. I definitely see value in that. Like the digital play space is someplace where the rules just like are kind of, just at your fingertips. That's great. That's really handy. It's a non-trivial setup, and I think we're gonna, I gotta go hat tip to Dr. Devidence for all of his shovel work in getting his Roll20, in mastering Roll20 that he can teach the rest of us. But once you're on a setup that's really running smoothly, there's definite, value in that. It's not just fancy skins and like bits and pieces that don't really change the game you're having. It's stuff that really helps the game flow more. And the thing that I've noticed is we were doing a bunch of underground crawling. Having a dark vision implementation where different members of your party are seeing different things at the same time is fantastic. That is a whole bunch of fun.
Yeah, that is, I think, been one of the big innovations of Roll20, the ability to have a cool map maker, make a bunch of maps, and then integrate them into Roll20 in a way that actually makes the walls and, prevents omniscience, I think has been their big thing. And that's one of the reasons why, you're sort of 50-50 on whether WotC are going to make their own VTT or if they're going to simply, take a big share in Roll20 and make it an official or second.
Yeah, the fact they grabbed D&D Beyond says that they might be looking more towards the let's just buy the people who've got the bugs worked out, rather than having another go and maybe it doesn't work. Or maybe it takes too long, or maybe it's a money pit. Why don't we just, if we're going to lay down the money, let's buy the thing we're looking for today.
Yeah, may as well. It's there. It works. It works fairly well, and apparently the price was right. There
was also a minor, we're sort of skipping around in the D&D Direct to get to the big meaty parts. There was also a whole bunch of what I like to call "this is still happening" announcements, where they say Baldur's Gate 3 is finally getting its release date. I didn't actually catch what the actual release date was, but because they were doing again another very cringe-worthy thing of characters running around in the Larian studio offices doing very shtick. The D&D movie is still happening, and it definitely has Chris Pratt in it. It's going to be at least as good as the Mario movie. Neverwinter, the MMO, is apparently still getting updates, which that seems to be the last chunk of 4th Ed inspired design that appears to have survived in the 5th Ed reasons. I did not expect Neverwinter, of all things, to have lasted this long. Other than that, they're having there's another adventure anthology coming out with the promise that this time the writers will actually compare their notes, and it will be a diverse cast of folks, so it won't just be the same old stuff as before. There's also campaign cases, which is apparently some kind of reusable sticker technology to create customizable terrain and generate your own creature tokens as you need. It has been a while since I've seen people really taking a stab at reusable stickers as a proper usable thing. And of course they continue to put their books out in different languages. A whole bunch of extra languages were announced. And they're also still doing APs. A star-studded cast of YouTube people will be doing yet another one of those official, semi-official.
That was I have to say, if that was definitely a star-studded cast in the sense that even I recognize those names and I'm not.
Yeah, one of the McElroys, one of the newer DMing advice people, Ginny D. I can't. The others are.
Yeah, there was a whole bunch of folk. I was like, oh, I know them. That's so great. Yeah, and I'm just doing a quick jump through to look at on Baldur's Gate 3, which I am patiently waiting for. When it gets here, fantastic. Maintaining good ratings across it. After whatever a slightly rocky start and people complaining, it does seem to have stabilized on whoever's commenting on Steam seems happy enough with what they're seeing, and given that they're a notoriously hard to please crowd, I'm regarding that as a pretty decent sign.
Yeah, but it's been a year-long beta at this point, hasn't it? So we have a year of people trying out the first 10 hours of the game.
10 levels, I think. Something, yeah.
I mean, at that point, I would very, very much expect it to be highly polished. I do recall that they said that they were deliberately making the content in that version to be the least played versions. It's all the really annoying evil characters and all the, trickier quests that they specifically wanted those to make it a better testing ground.
Huh.
That was the vibe I'd gotten. Maybe I took it up wrong, but yeah, I would, after so long, I would expect, Baldur's Gate 3 finally getting a release date. That's nice. It does go to show how much stuff has been delayed by the pandemic. It's just it's interesting that WotC's main books have been coming out with relatively little in the way of delays, but all of the side stuff like Baldur's Gate or the movie have had to take long delays. So it does sort of show the advantages of the tabletop industry has had in this lockdown paradigm.
Well, yeah, and it definitely, if there was ever, much like home office working, the tech was there, but people didn't love it. And I remember that first weekend of lockdown where all of a sudden Roll20 went clonk as everybody jumped on it. And they were like, all right, okay, well, I guess we can't play, but let's see if we can do it this way. And yeah, it was buggy at the start, but it got a hell of a lot better. And after that, it was rocking and rolling. They've had a great past 2 years.
Yeah, no, the virtual tabletops have had a great 2 years. Once they got over the supply issues. Foundry emerged during the pandemic, if I remember correctly, and became a very solid contender in from what I've seen of it.
I think I saw something like Roll20 was 80% of the VTT space, and Foundry was 18%. Maybe I'm misremembering the figures, but I got the impression that there was a big gulf between them, but that Foundry was very much in the catching up end of things.
But looping back to one of the other things, the other book that you mentioned, is it Tales of the Radiant Citadel? Is it Tales or is it Journey to the Radiant Citadel? Yes. Planar Adventure Anthology. I, for one, am very pleased about that. Really interesting choice by setting it out in the ethereal plane. And also very interesting choice I've been talking about here, there's nothing wrong in the Radiant Citadel. It actually is generally an okay community, one that, you come back to, and it's not like Sigil where you're going to have to be on your guard or someone's going to knife you when you're attempting to get your first night's sleep coming back after the adventure, which is, it's I think we have enough sort of gritty, cynical, horrible cities, and they've gone, oh, do you know what would be a nice change of pace? Someplace that's not actually that horrible, which I'm complete. I love my palette of options. I am very much welcoming. Here's a different option, and I really like having different planar nexi. We had the City of Glass. We had, City of Dees, but you wouldn't really want to go there. City of Brass, Sigil. There's a couple of other places, but it's always nice to see there are some other hubs that you can route stuff through, because your different types of campaigns you're going to want to run are going to, different hubs always give you different options for the flavor you're trying to run. And even if you don't base there, it's always good to have options to pass through, to throw contrast onto your kind of what's your main line of places. If you're doing one and it's relatively bright and helping people with problems based out of the Radiant Citadel, and then for one of your sort of sessions you bounce through Sigil, you're going to get out of Sigil and be like, we're never going back there, that was horrible.
Or we're only going back there if we really need to.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's fair. It is good to have this sort of, I like to say, it sort of fits more with the 5th Ed vibe of generally having this sort of contrast between safe, more whimsical stuff versus the very dangerous stuff in between. So, that's sort of an idea of this place of safety, but also it's in the middle of the ethereal plane, and can presumably is the impression that there's all these, much like the astral seas full of portals to the crystal spheres. The idea is that the ethereal realms will have what were they called, ethereal curtains or something?
Well, yeah, no, the whole the shtick, if I remember, for the ethereal is that you basically walk. If you know where to go to find a prime material, you walk there through the shallow ethereal. No, sorry, you're out in the deep ethereal, which is like the between everywhere. Then as you get nearer to any given prime material, you become the shallow ethereal, where like you're able to see in and you can walk through walls and everything, but like you can see what's going on. And then if you snap out of that, you're actually in the prime material. So it gets a bit metaphysical of like how separated are all of these things. Like, is it an actual 1,000-mile walk or is it all in your mind? And I'm not, that gets a bit fuzzy of like what exactly are distances, because I think in the ethereal, they might actually be somewhat closer to physical distances, because there are shallow ethereal counterparts to places on the prime. So effectively, if you stepped into the shallow ethereal and you stood still, eventually the planet would orbit away from you. And then if you step back out again, you're in wild space. So you're having a bad day. Don't do that.
Well, I'm sure they'll with the bunch of new authors, they'll have a whole bunch of interesting takes on that, and that should result in something pretty interesting, I think. Although, the other element of this that makes me curious is like, this is like the fourth of what we're officially calling Adventure Anthology, and that's been a pretty consistent thing on the schedule for 5th Ed since it's come out, is that apparently these are selling. They have the big damn adventures, your campaign books, so those seem to be doing relatively decent business, although the gap between them has definitely gotten longer as things have gone on, and now I don't think there's any on the horizon between Strixhaven and Dragonlance or Spelljammer, and Spelljammer is going to be a much smaller adventure. But they are still also producing these adventure anthologies, so they seem to be consistently doing well as well. So that implies that there is a stronger market for the shorter adventure. But WotC don't have a simple way of directly selling short adventures. They can't put out paperback modules like TSR did. The classic TSR 32-page module would probably suit a lot of people, but WotC is not set up to sell those. So they have to fall back on the anthology system, where they're still selling a 300-page hardcover, but it's filled with different episodic things. And I find that interesting in a way, because like they have, like, as we say, the DM's Guild with all of their old first ed material, or a lot of first and second ed modular material is there. You can get a lot of classic adventures for just like €5 or something. But in terms of physical product, the way game stores work now, shelf space means they have to put out hardcovers. They can't put out soft covers anymore, and that means everything has to come in anthologies. But people still seem to like this format because presumably they get enough usable material out of each one of these to fuel their games. Of the people who buy these, how many pick 3 or 4 of these adventures and run those when they need them? How many buy them and read them and never use them? And how many try going through each one in turn and force the anthology into an episode campaign?
Okay, so I can offer, anecdata, fine. But of my home game table, I have 2, completely new players. They started playing at the start of the pandemic. One of them had heard of D&D and wanted to try. One of them had never got roped into it by the other 2. Both of them subsequently have gone off to DM. Neither of them buy books to read. If they're buying anything, they're intending to take it to table. One of them went out and got Curse of Strahd, and one of them went out and got Candlekeep. And the one who went and got Candlekeep has bolted it onto the Stygian Library, and is using the 2 of those in a kind of combo for a library-themed campaign.
Stygian Library is a...
It's an OSR book.
Ah, okay.
It's basically a library crawl.
Aha, I see.
Exactly. And it's Emmy Allen, isn't it?
Oh, I blank on the author's name, sorry.
Hang on, yeah, Emmy Allen. So I've got, yeah. So I like it's, but yeah. So as a short answer to your question, they are not buying stuff to read it. Like when they're putting down cash for stuff, even though they're kind of like they're like they still play with me, but they're DMing their own tables. When it allows, both of them are having scheduling issues in that there's significant challenges of them getting regular scheduling, but they're not paying for stuff that they're going to just look at. They're paying for stuff they're going to use.
But they are going through, like, are they going through each adventure in turn, or are they picking and choosing, or are they using the Stygian Library to sandbox it, as it were?
Some kind of combo. I haven't quizzed them on exactly which way they're running through it, but I think they are not sure. I think, so Curse of Strahd is definitely running like kind of by the numbers. Yeah, and I'm not sure which way they're doing it for Candlekeep. But yeah, because coming back to your point about the individual adventures, I think it's the success of DM's Guild that has kind of made WotC go like, you know, how do we put out stuff that's going to go in here that people are going to go after when there's so much stuff, particularly Adventurers League. So that's that to me is the kind of WotC sanctioned short adventures. Is you get all of the Adventurers League episodes that go concurrent with any of the actual campaign books. And that's where that's the thing that sits in this niche now.
Doesn't DM Guild have a rather high cut of the proceeds go to WotC though?
Yep.
Yeah, I don't think we'll have to go into the exact economics another day. I don't think have them.
That would be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, we'll have to get someone on who's a bit more of an expert. I think I have someone in mind. It's an interesting ecology, and yeah, I do think they've probably done an awful lot of work to make the module as a sellable product, a thing in DM's Guild. But I just find it interesting that WotC themselves can't commit to the format that made TSR a big player in the 80s and to a lesser extent in the 90s before they completely they turned their own printing press into a machine to fund and then destroy them. Very interesting story. Look it up. I guess it's just a curiosity, and I think we're way off topic now.
So coming back of like stuff that plays directly to tabletop, let's say. So our core interest here. So we saw there was Onslaught, interesting. There's the thing about the movie. There's the MMO. There's the Baldur's Gate. So interesting stuff in there. But of the kind of three big blocks that are, and correct me if I'm wrong about three. That's like look, Spelljammer confirmed. Yay. Radiant Citadel, but we knew about that. But like it's on target. And Dragonlance crests the horizon. We don't know much about it yet, but it's the kind of other big thing.
I guess the main question then is, they have a hard time on how to and when to get this out, though, don't they? 2024, its anniversary edition is coming out. They have 2 years. They have, that makes sense that they're doing the sort of D&D Direct lineup now, and presumably they're going to having similar broadcasts every quarter or so, because we are in the end game of 5th Ed. They have 2 years to maintain their product line, get everything that they have to get out of the way before the end of the edition out of the way, and then start the process of smoothing into anniversary edition. And, you know, finally tying down, is this going to be 6th Ed? Is it going to be 5.5, or is it going to be 5th Ed plus? But that's a hard deadline, so I do think this sort of marketing approach is going to be only increasing going forward. I would expect one of these every 3 months or so to really nail down this product line and get us through this 2-year transition period.
I'm going to suggest two things on that. One is, if this Spelljammer, like kind of setting in a slipcase, works in the same way. Like it used to be in a box, but now it's like they're going to give it to us in like 3 hardbacks in a slipcase. If this new format works, they may well shove other old favorites or new stuff at us, because like you'd pick up the setting even this late in the day, because you'd be fairly confident you'll get mileage out of it, even if you need to retrofit the system. But if it's like you'd be a bit more like, you won't get as much time out of, say, an equivalent of the Tome of Magic if you think everything's going to get re-engineered in 18 months after you get your hands on it. The second one I was just going to say is, like, I think we're going to see a lot of test bedding on exactly this thing with the new D&D rules bit. Digital integration, digital onboarding, a lot of like, what about this? What about this? Does this work? Let's try this. So we'll see like a lot of weird digital gubbins as they throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. And like, so we'll see an awful lot of skunkworks type stuff happening as they try and get, figure out what's going to fly when they launch in 2024.
Yeah, absolutely. But right now, as of right now, all of the innovation is happening in how they sell the game to us. There's very little implication that they're going to be changing much in the way of mechanics. It's all in how it's going to be integrated into digital, what settings are going to be already ready for it, and, how many DM screens do we pack in with each slipcase. Those are the questions that are currently being answered by what this D&D Direct is foreshadowing. And there's no indication yet that they're going to come out with, as you say, a Tome of Magic or a Book of Nine Swords to try a whole bunch of weird and wonderful wacky mechanics and see something that'll turn into 4th Ed like they did back in the day.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. I mean, I get beyond like mechanical bits that are built into your strange new race, like the plasmoids or autognomes or whatever we're going to see in these guys. Yeah, there's not kind of new character mechanics. There's like the two mechanics that I might expect to see here is one, like fight my flying ships. So whatever my tactical spelljamming ship combat rule system is. And 2 is like whatever, if any, mechanics are in this Warriors of Krynn thing. Like the fact that it's bundled with the adventure book and battle game, it's both Dragonlance, both the same thing. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like it could be they're just both Dragonlance themed. Okay, fine. Or it could be that this is our mass combat rule system.
Yeah.
But in either case, neither of those do anything to like my fighter. My fighter at the start of this year is still my fighter at the end of this year. He hasn't had any rules updates or anything.
Yeah, he might be a Knight of Solamnia, but that's probably just going to be a bunch of faction mechanics or patron mechanics. It's not going to be, you're not going to do different dice.
Yep.
Okay, any other thoughts on the whole D&D Direct and what it portends?
Not from my side of things. The only one thing I would suggest is that's a lot of old material that's been ported forward in Spelljammer. Like the Rock of Bral, all of the ships looking alike. Like the Rock of Bral looks the same as it ever did. Like that's the same map as I used to have the wall of my bedroom back in the mid-90s. This is the same content with a new mechanics wrapper. I wonder, like, is this then the harbinger of they're going to go back and just like mine things? Are we going to see maybe Dark Sun? Are we going to see an explicit Greyhawk? Are we going to see who else could there be? Like, I'm not expecting to see Al-Qadim. I'm not expecting to see Oriental Adventures again. But I guess, I mean, who could Birthright? Maybe? Don't think so.
Possibly. I the impression I'm getting is maybe one more. Hold on. I'm trying to remember the last time we had one of these big announcements. How many? I think they said they were coming out with 3 settings and 2 of them would be old ones. So
yeah, Spelljammer and Dragonlance. Boom, boom.
That would imply one more setting in the plans, and it's not going to be a new one. And I don't think I think Strixhaven had already been announced by that point, so I don't think it's Strixhaven. So I think we can expect one more. And maybe Journey to the Radiant Citadel counts, but that's being marketed as an adventure anthology, not a selling book.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, like, there's a lot of, very different things in the magic space at the moment. Like New Capenna and what's that? Is it Kamigawa?
Neon Dynasty, Neon Kamigawa, yeah. They're trying a whole bunch of extra stuff there. And this is the kind of thing that they have gotten juice out of for D&D supplements before. They had the Theros book and the Ravnica book, all based on the stuff. So, yeah, potentially.
And I mean, like, if we're looking for a palette of options, I mean, Ravnica was something distinctly different. It was like your big, weird mega city. Strixhaven, like, let's do Magical College. So if we're going to see a new setting, I would imagine there'd be something that, like, is something quite different. New Capenna, like, gangsters, don't really have something that plays into that space. I would put non-zero odds on that. Neon Dynasty, maybe, as in if, like, it could also be bundled with, like, effectively 5e modern, 5e future rules. Could be. So, but yeah, if I was going to, that might be it. Or I would love to see some, something completely new. There's tons of great stuff in the magic settings. So if they basically told some people to cut loose and go find us something completely new, that'd be interesting. The one thing actually that did strike me as I was kind of doing a poke about my shelves, of an era with old line Spelljammer, we had Al-Qadim, which was crews and ships. We had, then for the D20 era, we had Swashbuckling Adventures, which was the 7th Sea port. We have not had and then we also had, what's this? There was like a Riptide or something that was the ships supplement. We haven't had anything that's crews and ships for 5e. We had Saltmarsh, which didn't seem to, generate an awful lot of nautical adventuring.
Yeah. It was, the actual nautical adventuring stuff was, as I say, sort of relegated to the back of the book. But an awful lot of the actual adventure content was only tangentially related to the idea of sailing around. And while you could combine this together into a single campaign, it wasn't a cohesive unit, as some people were hoping.
Yep, exactly. Though in fairness, I mean, they could, if they just left the Sword Coast, there's like a whole bunch of interesting stuff to be talked about just on Faerun. But I don't know. I don't know what it could be, and I see many routes to it leading to something interesting.
Yeah, it's all. There's still an awful lot to play for. 2 years is both a short and a long time, and I generally think that this was positive. I think this D&D Direct, even if the presentation felt a little cringe, the vibe and the products we're getting from it are generally positive.
You know what? I'm willing to say that presentation that wasn't aimed at us, frankly. That was cheerleading for a different demographic. And you know what? If I much prefer products that look solid and presentation that I'm a bit about, then the other way around.
That's fair. Okay, well, folks, if there's nothing more to say,
well, it'll be interesting to see what they roll out. Like if the art style is the same as it was, if the description is the same as it was, yeah, it's sounding like they're keeping somewhat to the spirit of the thing anyway.
And that is one of Fifth Ed's big claims to fame, is to keep the spirit of D&D alive. But folks, if you disagree with us heartily and say would like to explain to us in great detail how they've ruined Spelljammer and how we must stop Chris Pratt before he releases the D&D movie, you can hit us up on our social media, or SpeakPipe, which I guess is social media, or shout loudly in the middle of Dublin city streets and wait for the guards to arrest you. Whichever way of getting in touch with us, you can find us in all the usual places, links in the show notes. And for now. Until our next collection of attractive people to sell things are assembled, this party's over. Thanks for listening to The Adventuring Party. You can find show notes and links to things we've mentioned at www.theadventuringparty.net and on our Facebook page. You can leave comments there, or talk to our Twitter account at AdventuringPTY, or you can record a voice message at www.speakpipe.com/theadventuringparty. We can also be contacted directly by email at party@theadventuringparty.net. If you'd like to be in touch with the party all the time, come join our Discord server, link in the show notes. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike of version 3 license.